Matt, how
Hey.
are we?
Excellent, brother.
I'm enjoying Austin.
Dude, I'm sure you are, man. I feel like most people do.
What drew you here in the first place?
I think kind of the energy that you're feeling now.
Yeah.
I was living at home at the time. This is like right after the pandemic. And I had just heard about Austin. A fitness community, wellness community, running space. And like, I had never even visited, but I was like, all right. Like, I was living at my mom's at the time. And she was just got remarried. So she kind of gave me and my brother like a boot, like, yo, it's time either take over the mortgage or figure out what you guys want to do. And I'm like, all right, well, I was like working as a personal trainer at the time and I had an online business and I didn't have anything holding me to Maryland, which is where I lived before. So I packed up my car, bro, and I drove down here. And I had a former teammate of mine that I played college football with, American football. And he had lived down here. I crashed on his couch for 3 days and I found an apartment. And then the rest is history.
Figure it out as you go. Build the wings as you fly. One of
That's
my favorite phrases. So
That's it.
you had a background in football.
Correct.
It haven't always been running. I assume that was a key part of conditioning as you grew up. But growing up playing football, the identity, the focus, the process, the strategy that comes with it, I can imagine it's all quite consuming because rugby in the UK, similar, but it doesn't have, I don't think, the same level of admin, back office, dossier, laminated, here's
Correct.
the plays for the week sort of stuff. So what was it like growing up with that as your identity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it formed a lot of who I am today. I think I always speak on like the soft skills I got from playing football and how that's now kind of translated not even just in running, but also in business, in entrepreneurship. And I think it's now formed me into who I am today. And I think I show up in a different way just from like the focus and the intention to detail and all those things that are required in football. And I think to your point, rugby is kind of like soccer where it's like free flow.
Yeah.
You're just like, you adjust on the fly of how you play. And whereas football, like it's very organized. Like you go into a huddle, you say, this is the play that we're going to try to execute versus this scheme versus this defense. And to your point, like so much of it is playbook. It's you have a binder in training camp and you have to study these plays and be able to understand like what your role is versus this defense versus this look and all those things. So I think now, as I think about content, as I think about business and marketing and running, like I treat a lot of it in that same fashion.
What has given you more at a self-development level, football or running?
That's a great question. I think different seasons. I would say it's crazy for me to think it's running because I think so much of who I've become and how well I've excelled in this sport has come from football. So it'd be easy for me to be like Fergus, of course it's running. Like, you know, like I'm able to make impact and I've been able to scale my business. I've been able to have tons of people consume and follow and support my content. But I don't think that I would be able to be where I'm at right now if I didn't have that foundation for football.
Yeah.
So I think the easy answer would have been like, of course it's running, but no, I think like I played and dedicated 15, 16 years of my life to football. And I think all of those, like all that commitment, the discipline, the consistency, and like the determination over that long period of time has now formed me into who I am today as a runner. And I'd be lying if that wasn't a more pivotal moment in my career.
And am I right in saying that when you first picked up a camera and started filming things, it was actually football-based content? You were filming
1000%.
drills. Yeah. So the
1000%.
foundation's all there for everything.
Correct.
It's rugby. I mean, I was on the Coach Me Up podcast yesterday, day before.
Oh, no way.
It's all blending.
Those are the homies.
It was good
Yeah.
fun. It was good fun. And there were some things I discussed that I haven't gone quite as hard on as I thought I would have done. So if anyone's interested, go listen to that.
I love that.
But yeah, we were just talking about those soft skills, the foundational stuff and what that actually leads into. And it made me think about just how much of an impact rugby and the identity gave me that I can now translate into all things that we do similar things in terms of how we need to think about it. And I'm just so thankful for the opportunity to have played a variety of sports growing up and to have had that passion, that purpose, because I tend to find that a lot of people I enjoy spending time with now are people that have played team sports and really got in that arena. So the people you interact with in Austin, that energy that I'm feeling, that energy that you've said, I felt that too. Who do you choose to spend time with here? Are there similarities? Is sport at the center of everything, do you think?
I don't think sport is like the sole center, but I think it's a component. I think I tend to hang around with a lot of high achievers and they're not always entrepreneurs. Sometimes they're just high achievers in their full-time job, right? Yeah. I do think that I do somewhat find more relatability with people that are in our space. I think naturally just like whether it's from a business level or just an understanding of like what it really feels like to put yourself out there, like what it feels like to get some level of admiration, but also getting tons of criticism and like dealing with the in between. Business stuff, like whether it is like talking through like partnerships and what that looks like and how one monetizes their brand or their business. And I think naturally it's like, the old saying, like you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with. And I think the good thing about Austin is that there's so many people that are in our space that, ultimately are just regular guys, regular girls. And like to have those conversations where it is just super open and it's just, you're just shooting the shit a little bit. And it's just more so an opportunity to gain knowledge. And I think naturally I tend to be around people that are either smarter than me or better than me at something that I'm not good at. So I can then naturally just learn.
It makes problems seem smaller, doesn't it?
100%.
I think that's what I've really been thinking on whilst I've been out here is just, for me, one of the big things is just, like you said, spending time with people that do the same things day to day. And there's not a huge amount of those around me on a day-to-day basis. So I need to go out looking, but it's so easy to get stuck in the rigidity of the day-to-day because it's familiar. And then a couple of weeks passes, a month passes where I haven't allocated the time that I know is valuable to spend time with people that are just doing the same stuff, which is why I enjoy conversations like this one. So criticism, admiration, polar ends of the spectrum. we were at the track earlier in the week and we found we have a commonality between us, which are devoted letsrun.com forums. So how did it feel the first time that you found that there were a group of elitists on the internet talking about you?
Well, the first time I really even knew was when it's almost 2 years ago now, I ran a race under a different name, under someone else's bib.
Okay.
So I got ridiculed for being a bib mule. And that was probably the first time, Ferg, where I was like, oh shoot, like I can't just like
there's nowhere to hide.
Yeah, like because when I first got into running, I was like, I hadn't really grown my reputation around running, right? Like to your point, I was a personal trainer, I was doing football content, but I thought I could just be like, do stuff that people like that maybe don't have a following could do. Like every single marathon, someone bandits the race.
Yeah.
Every marathon, someone runs under someone else's name. More times than not, those people will never know. No, like there will be no ridicule from it. But to your question, like the moment that I did that, and then 24 hours later, a friend of mine in the running space sends me this article from marathoninvestigation.com saying, Matt Choi is a cheater, a fraud, a bib mule, and cheated the Houston Marathon to get someone else into Boston and all these things. And it was a moment where I had to reflect too, and also take a look at myself in the mirror and say like, it was my intent in that place.
Yeah.
Truly, like, was this my goal? Like, was I trying to do what this article is saying? And I think when I started to realize that wasn't the story, right? That was just what was perceived. I then started to create a different relationship with like, okay, how do I now manage this? Because to your question, I think the moment anyone gets criticism, anyone has a little bit of pushback, there's always a sense of doubt and insecurity that we all have as humans. We're like, oh shit, like now someone's like using my name and slandering it. And whether it's true or not, they're basically just taking what they're seeing online and then they're making a story. And in that moment, I would be lying if I didn't say that I felt like, oh shit, like now I'm getting calls from my brands that I work with, Nike, Dick's Sporting Goods, and they're saying, Matt, don't post anything from the Houston Marathon. Don't post anything with our brands in it until we figure out what the next steps are. So then for me, even from a creator and a business level, I'm like, oh shit, like this is not just like a slap on the wrist. Like this is like, I make a living doing this.
Yeah.
So like no different than anyone in their career. If you make a mistake and like now your job's on the line, of course your eyebrows are going to be raised and you're going to have some level of sensitivity around like, how do I tread now moving forward? So to answer your question, I think there's no easy way to do it. There's no book about how to deal with criticism or hate. Like it's something that you get thrown into the arena and then you figure out how you're going to respond from it just as a human. And I think playing sport and dealing with media kind of slowly trained me in that fashion of like, I played in 2 state championships in high school and we lost both state championships. Like having to speak to media about Matt, like I was the quarterback of our senior year team, like to answer questions on how I threw the game losing interception, having to talk to media and then be able to respond in a respectful manner, even though I'm emotional about losing our team's senior year state championship. Like I think all those micro moments of failure taught me years later, 8 years later, of like how to deal with this criticism in the same fashion, like and doing it with respect and not shying from it, right? I think that's what honestly, that was the moment where everyone was telling me, they're like, Matt, you have two options. Either do nothing, say nothing, ignore it, get off social for a couple of weeks and just like, pretend like nothing happens and people will forget. Or you speak on it, you own it, you take responsibility of your actions, and people love you or hate you for it. And I end up choosing that route.
And that's what's going to happen either way. Because the harsh reality of the internet and the way I like to look at things is that nobody is ever going to have, nobody that jumps to immediate conclusions is ever going to go out of their way to try and understand the bigger picture and the context that matters. And that's what matters. Because if you look at some of the biggest sporting names of all time, think of, using that example you gave there, the game-losing interception. You could have had a family car crash that week. There could have been a million and one things happening that inform and input into the human being at the center of that performance measurement in and of that moment. But the fans, the people, only see that moment.
Correct. And
that's the key. So I think what you said right at the start, which is how do you as an individual feel about the circumstances? If you've been caught out doing something you shouldn't have been doing, you're like, uh-oh. And that's different to, oh, hang on, I just did this for a bit of fun because there was a free bib going and I didn't really think about the consequences here. It's a very, very different set of things. So yeah, most of my letsrun.com forums are just saying that I run like I'd rather keep my 10-minute mile pacing than run like a pregnant 85-year-old grandma or something like that. And I thought, you know what? I've got short femurs, which means I maybe run like a pregnant 85-year-old grandma, but I bet I can squat more than you, runner _1873-4. All of these things. So that I just thought we'd knock that on the head because letsrun.com is where dreams go to die. But I think that really feeds into a lot of the narrative that you and I guess, are trying to promote, which is that everybody's an athlete, running is for everybody. Things are more accessible now than they ever have been at a self-development level. And a lot of the narratives on what is elite, what makes an athlete, what level do you need to be to do X, Y, or Z is, I guess, what you want to achieve with your content to push against. So what makes a person a runner?
I think honestly, it's the will. It's a mentality. I think all of us are, right? I think it's funny. Like when I was on my way back from Houston today, like I was talking with a couple of friends about, some people that I knew that ran Boston Marathon and they were going to finish their 6-star, but they didn't finish it in time. And all the world majors have a cutoff time, typically 6.5 hours.
Yep.
Now, is someone a runner who completes a marathon at 7 hours, but they were 30 minutes off of hitting their cutoff time? 1,000%. Running looks different for everyone, right? Obviously, you have some of the fastest people in the world that will finish marathons in 2 hours, and they'll never even see the last person that finishes a race. They'll never see them. They're in the hotel, they're eating lunch, they got coffee.
On the flight home,
they probably have a second meal by the time the person that last finished at a world major marathon, right? But I don't think that discredits the person that finishes last. So to me, a runner is anyone that wants to toe the line, anyone that has any level of will or mindset to put themselves in an uncomfortable environment. And I think when we start talking about like, oh, even races like Boston, like it's an elite race. You have to qualify to get in. But you and I both know that there's always third doors. There's always side doors into getting into anything in life, whether it's a club, whether it's a Boston Marathon, whether it's X, Y, and Z. And if you are someone who's willing to get out of your comfort zone and to do something that scares you, I think that person should be classified as a runner, whether they finish in 7 hours or in 2 hours. At the end of the day, for you and I, Fergus, like our whole message is around like this sport came, for me at least, like it was something that pushed me out of my comfort. It's something that scared me a little bit. It's something that I didn't enjoy to do, but for whatever reason, it challenged me also to be a student and say, hey, like, let's go, let's tackle this thing. Clearly it's a weakness. Like, how do you continue to work on it? So I think for anyone that has that mindset that wants to do that, that's classifies someone as a runner. And even if you're not even on that level of extreme of wanting to do a marathon to push you out of your comfort, if you go walk, if you go do a 5K, if you jog a 5K, like you are a runner. And I think it's anyone that is willing to put themselves in that arena to just go test themselves. And I think at the end of the day, like every human can do it. It's just a matter of how committed you actually want to be.
I think at the core of all of that, again, is context, is that the person that's crossing the line in 6.5 hours and just making the cutoff by the skin of their teeth has probably gone on an enormous journey.
Correct.
From the start of the training process to the end, and in that 6.5 hour period in their own head, which is only going to carry them forwards in a positive way. And I think what some people on the internet forget is that whilst, yes, you may be genetically gifted and you can just turn up and run a 3.5-hour marathon early doors, like we've probably met people playing sport growing up,
Correct.
that you're just like,
it's easy.
how is this guy this good at everything? And he's handsome, prick. Paddy, if you're watching, my friend from school, that's you. He can also speak French. But nonetheless, it's a case of, we forget that.
Correct.
And I think I come up against this with the hybrid athlete concept. I think the people that hate the buzzword the most are CrossFitters, which is interesting because they've only just come out of the back end of having to fight for their buzzword to become relevant and validated not that long ago. So they were only recently in the same box that I guess is evolving quickly, but surely the people that should have the most empathy, compassion, and understanding for those that are sort of finding a new pathway that's increasing accessibility to lots of single discipline sports should be the ones that are most empathetic to. Actually, I see the value in this at a personal level because there's no competitive arena where the vast majority of you and I, we train for our own gain. Mm-hmm. How many people do you know that are actually fully fledged professional athletes that you spend time with? I'm very few.
Very few.
Very few.
Like I know a couple Olympians, but like I'm not like tight with them, but I know them, right? But like very few.
But the vast majority of people that do the sort of things that we do are doing it for their own gain. And that means that the more access that can be created for people to access more things to go on their own journey, the better, surely.
100%.
And I think that's where I think the internet's getting it wrong a little bit these days. So what is your take on the narrative at the moment? Because there's a lot of ego, there's a lot of quote unquote toxicity around elitism, around standards, around what makes who what and what category you need to be or what standards you need to be doing certain things. How do you think people should be able to enter the space?
Well, I think you kind of said it a lot around the validation. I think like my approach and like what I believe is the moment that you need the validation from someone else to classify you as whatever X, Y, and Z, you're already screwed.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you need someone, if you need to run a 2:25 because you feel like that's going to make the elite runners make you feel like you're more credible, then you're already losing because once you do it, then you're going to realize that next thing's going to be, well, you didn't Olympic qualify. The bar is always going to move.
Yeah.
So if you're not able to validate yourself, then it's not going to matter. You're always going to want the next thing. You're always going to be chewing on the next thing. So I think my opinion on it is that at the end of the day, more people moving their body and being active and working on that self-development and their own health, that's all that matters, really. And I think Kipchoge said this all the time. He's like, I want to make the world a running world, period. Like, who cares what it looks like?
Who is probably one of the very few people who has the right to have a huge ego about this sort of thing.
100%, right? But like the thought that like 250 guys or 218 guys have this audacity to hate on other people or to say someone that runs 3 hours is just jogging or to say like, oh, if you're running 6 hours, like you shouldn't even don't even sign up. Like the thought of that to me is just such a scarcity mindset that I don't operate on. Yeah. So I can't relate with. And I just don't want to be around those types of humans. And I know them here. I know the ones that live in Austin that shit on a lot of the creators, that shit on people that aren't fast. And to me, it's just, I think it just comes from people's own insecurity. Right. And obviously now, Fergus, we live in a space where you and I get to benefit off of putting ourselves online in a sport that most of these people wish that they could be professionals in, period. And that's truly where the envy comes from. People are upset that there's average Joes, technically average Joes, that are able to monetize and build a brand and build a business and be an entrepreneur in something that they wish that they could do. And most of those people work full-time jobs. They train their ass off and they don't have time for anything else besides training, maybe a little bit of their personal life, and then their full-time career. Whereas for someone like you and I, like you can go travel somewhere, like you can go travel to a different country, keep training, document what you're doing, and for whatever reason, be able to build a brand around it because you have some level of understanding of where attention is and you have some level of charisma or you have some level of confidence in yourself that you want to share what you're doing. So I think to me, like, I'm always in the favor of humans and people empowering themselves. And that's why even for me, when I go to races, like I love the fact that people that support me, they aren't typically front of the pack people. They're in the middle of the pack or they're at the end. And I think that's who I'm always speaking to because at the end of the day, if more of those people get empowered, that's only helping the sport.
Yeah.
Period.
And it's opening people up to the reality that actually lots of things that they thought previously they were not capable of doing, the downstream effect of people in workplaces, people in friendship groups, where one person is the one that breaks the mold, might open the door to, you know what, maybe I will commit 6 months to trying to squat my body weight for the first time. Maybe I will go back to five-a-side football on a Wednesday night. Maybe I will pick up those golf clubs that have been rusting my attic. Maybe I will go on that bike ride with my dad before in the next 5 years something could happen to him and I won't get to see him again. All of the human stuff at the center of all this is why I just cannot compute, especially in the same sport, when people just can't celebrate progress as a whole. Because the world's moving quickly. The world's moving erratically. There's a lot of bad, there's lots of good, but we need to choose how to navigate it within our own world first and foremost. Otherwise, we're already fucked.
Period.
In my mind. So you mentioned that we are very, I mean, I'm sat here right now. This is an example. I'm sat here right now on a podcast with you in Austin, whilst I can travel and do all these things from anywhere in the world, which is one of the things that I feel most privileged to be able to do. It's quite hot here, which means
it's nice here right now.
No, the past couple of days, since
chilly.
The day I was with you at the track, unbearable. Day after, unbelievable, fantastic. And I'm hoping it'll be like that when I'm out in the sun at the F1 all weekend.
I think so. I think it'll be
so
good.
You have done how many marathons now?
I lost track. I mean, in 30 plus.
30 plus. In how many cities? Pretty much every corner of the world, isn't it?
Close. I mean, there's definitely, I haven't been to Africa. I haven't been to South America yet. There's a couple spots I haven't been.
Okay. So the majors, favorite major?
New York.
And you're doing that in 3 weeks time, 2 weeks time. Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Exciting. Least favorite major? That's a tough question. I'm sorry. I didn't prep you for this.
It's a tough question. It's tough. And it's no disrespect to anyone, because like it's obviously they're all excellent. But obviously if I were to choose, I think right now probably Berlin.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've only done it once. Like I'm kind of jaded to even give that as an answer. I mean, I would say none of them are worse, but none of them are bad. But I don't know. I mean, I think Berlin was like a mix, because it's a fast course. I helped a friend of mine that she wanted to get BQ time. So we ran, me and my buddy Rob Dalto ran a 3:24, and we just paced her for the whole time at 3:24.
Cool.
So it wasn't like I went to go there in PB. So I don't know. Like my experience was somewhat jaded, I guess. But
the reason I ask is because I think the key is the experience around it, and I think that's what these events represent, is the experience of not just the process, but also the rose-tinted glasses of visiting a place for the first time, to run a marathon there, to experience the food there, to see the people there, to see what I heard this year at Berlin was the biggest conglomerate of brands doing big activations in the world ever, which was very cool, to the point where I know certain brands are just like, we're not even going to bother. The big brands are here and we can't afford to keep up with them. But what would be, are there any real highlights for you that aren't the times at the end, that aren't the actual experience of running the marathon itself, but what the marathons have given you in terms of the exploration, the people you've met? Is there anything that sticks out as the real value between the lines?
I mean, I think the 1000%. I think the travel opportunity is truly something that, like, I can't quantify what that's done for me as a human. Not only from the personal relationships and the people I've gotten to meet and the people that have supported me for years, and I get to come to their country, or I get to come somewhere closer to their country so that they can actually meet me in person. But I think something like the Sydney Marathon this past year was something so beautiful to see. I mean, people that I had connected with at a different world major in London that I then made friends with that were people from Sydney, and to then come to Sydney, which is almost 20 hours away from where Austin, Texas is, and almost feeling like I felt like I had people there that made me feel like I was coming home, that made me feel so welcome in their country, in their city. And like, I think something like that, like it's hard to quantify what that means when you have someone boots on the ground that are willing to show you around their city, that are proud to show you around the best spots to go to. And I think that is something that through my years of travel now, like it's one of my favorite things about the marathon thing is that I love the fact that I get to go and do it and visit places I've never been. And so much of my travel is around racing, but so much of the racing is culturally for me to just be like, oh, I've never been here before. I'm going to stay extra on both ends of the trip to make sure that I get to actually experience it and soak in the culture. So I think like Sydney was like, that was something that just like, when I thought about how far away it is, and I actually have some people from Australia that follow me just because, you know, the language barrier, they're able to consume my content. Even more so than even when I went to Korea. Like a lot of Koreans don't speak as much English or don't watch American content. So like there's more Aussies, there's more people from the UK that follow and support me than in Korea, and I am Korean.
Yep.
So I think for me, it's like anytime I have an opportunity to go and learn a different culture and be part of something that, is outside of my wheelhouse, it's just such a beautiful thing. And the fact that running is the vehicle that can allow me to do that. I mean, I always tell people, man, there's no better way to see a city than on foot or on bike.
Agreed.
Period.
Other than the fact that I very much bought into that idea, but as I was telling you at the chat the other day, last time I did that running across Ibiza, I rolled my ankle and injured myself for 6 weeks. So first time in New York, run a lap. First time to Ibiza, run the length of the island, and then basically snapped my ankle with 200 meters to go. So good recommendations with caveats, I would say. So ultra running versus marathons. Have you found that they have provided different lessons to you?
100%. I think completely different atmosphere, completely different energy. I think a great way for me to put it is like, I feel like I'm a very balanced person in a lot of things I do. And, people get shocked when I say like, I'm more introverted than I am extroverted, even though people see me online and people meet me and they're like, dude, there's no way, man. I'm like, if you guys only saw like how I am just when I'm at home, and I'm just like, most times I've recharged just on my own time. And I think so much about ultra marathons is that.
Yeah.
Less people that sign up. There's not much of a crowd. Like you just go into a mountain and you're in your own thoughts. And you need to be comfortable in it, because there's going to be moments of doubt. There's going to be moments of pain and suffering and fear and uncertainty of if you're going to finish and if your body's going to hold up. And all these thoughts come into your head, no matter how gritty, no matter how resilient, no matter how tough someone is, they'd be lying if there isn't moments of those doubt and all those things. On the flip end, a marathon, when you go to New York City, man, you're stimulated for 26 miles. There's not a moment on the course besides the bridges where there's not people yelling and screaming your name and cheering you on, strangers cheering you on, people you've never seen, you never know. And how much stimulation you get from a race like that. It's such a beautiful thing to see people come together that don't even know each other, but for whatever reason, they come out on this day once a year and they it's like family. It's like a block party.
Yeah.
And I think to your question of like the lessons learned, I think there's so much to be learned from both ends. And I think I challenge anyone that, if you've done a couple marathons and like you've really like are addicted to that kind of stimulation, go try and go on a mountain, go on a trail run, to go sign up for an ultra and just see the difference of like the complete opposite parallel of like what it feels like to go be on a mountain on your own time and be comfortable in your own thoughts and be in solitude. And I think there's a beautiful thing on both ends of the spectrum. And I think for me, I first started running ultras first before I even got into any of these world majors. I didn't even know what the world majors were. And I think so much of who I am, I think is actually fitting to be more of an ultra guy, because I'm comfortable in that space of not needing that validation, not needing the external support. As even, and for, I get so much of it. So people are like, they're shocked. Even people were shocked at how well I did in Leadville.
Yeah,
and I think for me, it's like...
Was it 24:49?
Exactly. I got sub 25.
Were you sub 25 was the aim, was it?
Yeah.
That's
and it's an
11
epic goal.
minutes. That's it's so crazy when you think about it, isn't it?
Crazy.
That journey, like, oh, I'm going to make it.
100%.
Oh, maybe I will, maybe I won't. Oh, no.
There's so much of the emotion that come into that. And I'm such a long race. And yeah, I think to your question, I think both of them are great. And they offer different things. And, some people gravitate to one towards the other. And some will never even gravitate to ultra because it's just a distance. But I would challenge someone to just try it.
Yeah, 100%. And I've only done one marathon event. I've only ever done a best effort marathon once. And it was 2.5 weeks ago.
And your next one's coming up.
Well, spring next year. I'm basically probably gonna do it on home turf. Got to now, really. I'm gonna build on the back of the marathon prep, and the whole reason I've never been appealed to one, or I've never found it appealing, is because I'm not competitive with anyone barring myself, and I've always enjoyed. I think maybe there's a little bit of the fact that it's so conventionally measured as well, whereby in my head, if it begins with a 3, will that give me as much as exploring a new mountain, exploring a new trail will? Probably not. And I know how much it's going to take from me in the training prep to just pound tarmac and tracks, which limits my exploration and adventure and training as well as the event itself. So I've done just under 50 ultras and one actual best effort marathon, which is just hilarious. And I really, really enjoyed it. But it doesn't give me that just pure, unadulterated freedom in my own head in a new environment kind of just unpack things in a certain way. I find ultra endurance training and events like moving meditation.
Yeah.
Whereas marathons is you're moving metrics. That's what you're trying to do. And I think the value in both is enormous. And that's why I think people if they've got the opportunity to, of course, would be wrong to not dip their toes in both ends.
I agree.
I'm biased with lifting as well. I've gone from a powerlifting background where it's smelling salt, slap on the back of the head, and go and pull that weight off the bar, off the floor, to running 250 kilometers as a single stage ultra. They're very, very different things and give very different lessons, let me tell you. But I get so much boys will be boys joy from picking up something from the floor and then having a central nervous system come down as all the caffeine leaves my system, to hallucinating at 3 a.m. on night 2. They're just totally different things. And I think that's what's most exciting about it all is the opportunity to learn. And like you said earlier, be a student. So if you could distill down on the spot, harsh of me, I know, the 5 lessons that you've taken from ultra endurance, what would they be?
I think five lessons. Wow. One, I would say to be adaptable. I think so many people go into a prep, they go into something, they're like, it has to be so dialed in, where I think so much around ultras is around, adjusting on the fly. And I think ones that succeed a lot in those races are ones that are able to understand that every race is going to be a little bit different, that you have to just adapt. I think 2 would be to lean into curiosity. I think when you first get into ultra, you're just like, most people can't fathom the distance. They're like, I could never do 100. But the moment you say that, then you're right. You're never going to do it. But if you just inch in and you're like, all right, well, hold on. I've done marathons. Like, let me dabble in the 50K. Let me see if I could do 100K. And you kind of slowly build that momentum, and you just kind of lean into your own curiosity of like, shoot, like, what can I do? Like, if I actually said, you know what, screw work, screw everything else right now. I'm going to focus on just what I can physically do. Let's go push the limit and then just go see. And I think that's a great way to, one, learn more about who you are. I think another thing just like around nutrition, I think like dialing on nutrition is something that a lot of people ignore. And I think it's something to really make sure that you can focus on, because I think ultras, like, you're out there for so long, you can't just rely on gels. Some people can. I know some of the elite runners the guy that won Leadville, he only ate gels and he ate like a little bit of other stuff.
He wasn't even out there for that long though.
He's out there for like a marathon, like a 50 mile time.
Yeah, crazy.
And like figuring out like prior to getting into a race, like what fuel and what kind of foods and nutrition do you want to actually consume during a course of a long race? I think embracing solitude is something that I think I've really thought a lot about, especially during Leadville, and understanding that that's just part of life, right? Like, if you're not composed and if you're not aware of who you are, those moments are going to creep into you and you're going to have a lot of doubt. And I think it's overcoming that. And I think it's embracing the fact that in life, most of the things that we do, like, you are going to do them alone. And I think once you can master the inner voice, so much of the other external things of life just become easy. Like stress is like, I always tell people, like, I don't have much stress. Like, most of my stress happens in these moments of like crazy races. And I'm like, that's going to be the most stress, the most stimulus that my body's going to really feel. Cause I feel like what ultra running has done is it's allowed me to have perspective about like what really is something to be worried about. What's really something that I should be like so bummed about. Like when I get cut off on the highway, or if my coffee's not right, like, these are minuscule things that some people, they feel as if their world is ending.
Yeah.
And I think the moment you run a long endurance race, you start realizing that like those minuscule things don't really matter. And I know that I kind of said 2 there, but I said one last one would be the people you bring with on this journey. As much as I just said about how important solitude is, how equally important it is around getting like-minded individuals to come and support you. Because as much as I wanted to run sub 25 hours for it, I couldn't have done it without my team.
Yeah, 100%.
Couldn't have done it without my pacers and my crew and all the people that were involved that weren't even at Leadville, whether it was my physios or my PTs and the people that are rooting me on from the sideline, right? And I think the thing about ultra, even this morning, I went to go run with Matt Johnson. Like, you start realizing that like you and I probably know, and we are part of this group of crazy people that do all this crazy shit. Most people in the world, they know one guy like that, one girl. You and I can list numbers of people that I know personally that are conquering
just
crazy.
Pick up the phone. I've got 120K over the weekend.
You need
want
help?
to come join? Yeah.
Like, and the fact that I know so many people like that, it says a couple of things that like, yeah, like I've entered myself into that kind of group of crazy, but also that you surround yourself with people that can also relate with it. that understand that don't call you crazy.
Yeah.
When people call me like, yo, I'm running 850 miles across Texas, I don't think it's crazy. Do I think it's somewhat dumb? Yeah, maybe a little bit.
How can I help?
Yeah, and that's always the framework. Finding people that are willing to say, you know what? I'm going to help a friend complete their mission and leave my ego at the door. I'm going to do whatever it takes to help this person because they have some ambition, they have some conviction inside to really want to do something crazy. And I know that I want those people around me when I want to go do it selfishly for myself. So I think the people that you're around is such a critical component around ultra.
It's equal parts disappointing and encouraging that I agree entirely and could probably sleuth the internet to create a word for word comparison of things that I've said about the lessons I've learned from ultra over the years, which means it's disappointing because it means that I'm not actually very insightful. And it's encouraging because it means that essentially the lessons for most people can be the same. And I think that's what's universally applicable because it's very fucking hard to give yourself any time away from devices, any time away from your own head. Even when you are on your own, you walk in, people default to headphones.
Correct.
People need something, some sort of stimulation. And ultras take that away from you. And in an ever increasingly fast-paced world, we do need to default back to some recalibration time. The most unique experiences I've had in life, I'm pretty confident are the support crew experiences that we've had around ultras. The double brutal Ironman distance. So I did a double Ironman distance triathlon in extreme setting in September 2022. And that was a whole weekend of just chaos. Had there been cameras on in the car, I think every member of the support crew would be in jail. There's some things that I said just tongue in cheek that I'm like, oh, that's a reflection of my tiredness, I'd say. It's just chaos. But you think back, you're like, try and explain that to somebody. Walk into a pub in rural parts of the UK and explain what you've been up to at the weekend. You'll just be met with, what are you talking about? It's just crazy. And that's why I think this is really cool, because there's a lot of conventional fun. There's a lot of conventional things that are normal to do and things that give people joy that are easily accessible. But how cool is it to go out there and find novel ways of having a good time with your friends? Weird example, but my cousin studied pure maths at Oxford. Mm-hmm. Can't really comprehend that. In the same way, he probably can't comprehend the things we were just discussing. But he went on to do a PhD in maths. And he told me that to achieve a PhD in maths, you have to come up with a new mathematical formula. And I sat there with my mouth open like, what? Something new in maths. And I just couldn't. And then he showed me kind of his workings. I was like, this isn't maths. It's like a whole different language. Yeah. I could not even wrap my head around it. But it really made me think about how exciting for him as somebody that is mathematically minded to have the opportunity to come up with something new in the space that has drawn his attention and pulled on his curiosity for so many years. And essentially, I think that's what these projects create. Matt running across Texas, who I'd not actually seen he was doing that until he mentioned it, was just super cool. He's going to finish tomorrow, isn't he?
Yeah.
That's self-supported. It's been built from scratch, creative process, speaking to brands, learning sales skills, getting pied, rejected left, right, and center, finding the right people, probably finding the wrong people and sending them on their way, exploring parts of Texas he'd probably never get to experience, having the memories along the way, having the storytelling, creating the content, developing, all the list goes on and on and on. And that only comes from being stupid enough to try.
Correct.
And that's what I think is so cool about the modern world in terms of the positive side of content creation, the positive side of the decreasing barrier to entry, even though there's a lot of people who've spoken about that trying to increase it for their own gain, that gives every single person in the world who's physically able to be able to push themselves in one way or another. But at the core of all that is identity, because we're all looking for something to escape from to some degree. We're all trying to attach ourselves and feel like we belong. And I'm fortunate enough that I've got lots of different sports I can sort of swing the pendulum on depending on how I'm feeling or where my body is allowing me to. Whereas I'd say running is very much your core, your day-to-day. If you had if your Achilles snapped tomorrow, how do you think you're right? Yeah, touch wood. Yeah, this is actually a wooden table as well. That's good news. Good. That's good news. How would your identity cope with that reality?
I speak on this often. Actually, I feel like my identity would then be around the recovery. Like even right now, as I sit here in front of you today, like I don't think my identity is wrapped around being a runner or an ultra marathoner. Right? I think at a human level, I'm a human first, and I enjoy media. I enjoy marketing. I enjoy branding and storytelling. And I think to me, that's actually more of who I am than just a runner. And I think running is just a vehicle to allow me to do all those things. So if something like that did happen to me tomorrow, then I would find a way to storytell around what that process looks like. And then to show people the ins and outs of, yeah, like it sucks. Sometimes you get the short end of the stick. Sometimes you train your ass off and something still goes wrong. And ultimately, you can't control what happens after the fact. It's now, how do you control the narrative inside your own head, as hard as it is, as tough as it is, as much that as it affects my business too, probably, right?
Yeah.
Because if I can't go to world majors and I can't do X, Y, and Z, like, yeah, at some financial level, it also hurts revenue and it hurts the business. But I think equally, not getting so consumed in just the one activity that I do is one of the biggest lessons I got from playing football. Was I was so consumed as my identity as a football player when I was playing through high school and college. And that was exactly how I was showing up. Oh, I'm a football player. Like, that's what I felt comfortable explaining myself as, versus, no, like, I'm a student athlete, or I do X, Y, and Z. Like, I just happen to also play football. So I think as I got in transition and I started getting into running and in personal training, I started telling myself, I'm like, I never want to get back to that moment of life where I feel like I'm trapping myself in a box. Because at the end of the day, society is always going to do that to you. Everyone's going to always say, oh, you're that runner guy. You're that TikTok guy. And I always say that if I'm 6 feet under and if people only remember me for just being the runner guy, then I've sold myself short. So I think if something like that does happen to me, then, and obviously it's easy to say this here as I'm healthy and I'm sitting right in front of you. But I think where my mind goes is that I would wrap that on its head and flip it on its head and say, hey, like, how do we now keep the same mindset and framework of being positive and being optimistic and looking at the good even in this shitty situation, to then help allow other people to say, hey, when you get through something like this, like, don't let this dictate who you are. And I think that's what I would do.
Not taking yourself so seriously is a superpower.
My friend, it's, I think, one of my greatest gifts.
And so many people get so wrapped up in trying to take them. I think there's a real confusion in the modern world between doing things that you're passionate about with commitment and taking them seriously, versus you, the individual, taking the things that are important to you too seriously and projecting that outwardly.
Correct.
Because that then prevents other people from potentially discovering the things that they can care about and take seriously, because you can become biased. I have never understood bodybuilding, the draw to it. I got really lean once, and I enjoy it. It was my entry into health and fitness, and it gave me a sense of control and ability to manipulate variables that was really valuable. But when I was actually getting leaner and leaner and leaner and looking at myself sub 10% body fat and punishing myself for not being leaner and not doing more, I realized, oh, this isn't for me. And that's fine. I discovered that. And thankfully, I was only 19 at the time. I had the foresight to be able to go, right, discover something else and move into powerlifting. That's not me saying that I think bodybuilding is bad. That's not me saying that I think bodybuilders have got it wrong. That's me saying that for me personally, I don't have that spark in me. But there's people that confuse not having the spark in them with the thing is bad. And that's wrong, because people are drawn to different things for different reasons and get different value from different elements. So I think the identity piece is, especially in a social media world, very important, because I've been wrestling with injury for the whole summer, really. Yeah. And I think I've become a bit disconnected from the reason that I started training and documenting content around my training in the first place, because the documentation of it has become a higher priority than the training itself, or the two have become too blurry and intertwined to the point where it feels very much like work, like we were saying at the track the other day. So I'm actively out here to try and sort of get some headspace to be able to confront that and think about how to approach it next. And I'm not disappointed in myself, but I'm trying to retrace my steps to understand where I extinguish that spark so that I can try and, it's not gone. Just, I don't want to sound defeatist, but it's just, I'm trying to proactively understand at what point did you start taking the wrong things too seriously, because that disconnected you from the whole pure human, childish, curious reason that you actually began that thing in the first place. And I think that's the essence of why I like training as a mechanism for self-development, because it allows adult PE. That's what I keep calling it. I've called it that a lot recently. If you're not having fun engaging in some adult PE, then what are you doing it for?
I love that, man. I think, when you said like not taking yourself too seriously, I think I smiled just because I feel like that's to my core, like how I've been able to build my brand for the past couple of years. And like my brother is someone who's like seen it up close, and like he sees how like when like the good things happen or the bad things happen, I'm just like, to me, it's just like, it's an opportunity, or it's a distraction, whatever it might be. Like, I live life so lightly because I don't have any expectation from anyone. And I feel like for me, like I just try to give as much value to strangers, to random people. And I don't ever expect anything back. And I think so much of it is just coming from a place of confidence that I know that I'm going to be able to win whether people are on my side or not, just because I'm playing the game long enough where I feel like regardless of what I do, whether I go and build a business tomorrow because I feel like people are like, yo, you have a follower now, like followership now, like why don't you start your own business and make your product and all this stuff? I'm like, when the timing's right. You know, I think so many times people try to rush things to get validation from the external. Oh my God, oh, you're crushing it right now. And like the thought of what does crushing it even mean? I thought I was in the cold plunge right before this. I'm like, people's definition of success is just different.
What's yours?
To me, it's just having freedom. It's to be able to do what I want, when I want, and with the people I want, ultimately. And I never want to spend time with people that I don't enjoy their company. I don't enjoy the aura or the vibe that I get from them. I think to me, a lot of that comes from the foundation of freedom. Like the fact that I get to travel and I never have to ask somebody, hey, can I go do this thing? I don't have to sign in for PTO. I never have to like when someone, they're like, yo, you want to come to Australia? I'm like, sign me up.
Yeah.
To me, like that is what success is in the current state. Now, I think everyone's definition changes. And if I had a family in 3 years, I'm going to say, I want to be the best dad ever. That's my definition of success then. And I think I still would value having some level of freedom to then not feel like I have to go into office early so I can then pick up I want to be able to just have the flexibility to do what my role and responsibility is as a human, as a man. And I think that might change down the line. Like, do I want to start a big business and make a product down the line? Would that be successful? Maybe, maybe not. But I think it's just like, that's something that it's different for everyone. But I think to the point of like not taking yourself too seriously, I think it's a great way to make yourself realize that it is like being a kid. So many kids when they're young, they fail and they're okay with it. They repeat, they fall down. When you're first learning to walk, right? Like you're crawling, you barely stand up for a couple seconds and you fall down. But for whatever reason, when you fall down, like you're not like depressed and you're defeated. It's like those kids kind of have a light smile sometimes. And sometimes they might cry because it hurts their butt or whatever. But I think that mindset of like not taking this life so seriously is a great framework. And I think for a lot of people, it releases the expectation. It releases the monkey on their back that they have to go prove it to the world. Where at the end of the day, man, if you could prove it to yourself, like that's actually the most sustainable model.
Be your own hero is one of my favorite mantras because it just removes all of the noise of external validation. And one of my favorite examples that summarizes everything you've just said, in my mind anyway, is if you buy a supercar to be seen in it, you're a fucking idiot. If you buy a supercar because downshifting makes you giggle like a child and forget about all your stress and worries and you appreciate the engineering and it's something you've dreamed of and played with Hot Wheels when you were younger and it gives you joy of what you've accomplished intrinsically, it's a lot of money, but it's arguably a good use of money. And I've spoken to people at both ends of the spectrum. And again, it goes back to making sure that you don't ever take things so seriously that you become biased on your opinions on things. Because I'm sure Dave Ramsey would disagree with what I've just said there.
Correct.
I love that. There was something you mentioned there that success, I think, is quite intertwined with masculinity in the modern world. And you mentioned ambition to become a father and be flexible and freedom around that and all those sort of things, very much things that I reflect on. And for context, my definition of success used to be very linear, led me down a negative experience with my mental health. And I came out the back end of that. And I now try and define my own world of success as enjoying spending time with the people I enjoy doing things with, doing things that I enjoy. And I keep it vague because being too black and white gives you opportunities to label things a failure or a success too binarily, and life is lived in the gray. So you said be a man, just passingly there. But I know that your dad wasn't around a huge amount when you were connected with him, weren't you? But he wasn't in the household day to day. So what is your definition of masculinity and what sort of man do you want to be?
It's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think one, being comfortable in your own skin, I think that comes in a lot of formats. I think from an emotional side, it's understand that like even as men that you have emotions and how to better manage them and how to not allow a wave of emotion to dictate how you respond to things. And I think also on another lens, it's like being a provider. It's being someone who not just being strong from like a physical standpoint, but someone that is like a foundational piece. And I think for me, not having that at home and having to see like my mom kind of play a motherly and fatherly figure in certain roles and just like having to kind of play both sides. A lot of like my mentorship around masculinity came from different coaches or mentors over the years. And it's people that I've now see that have enough self-respect to understand that once you have a kid, like that becomes like one of the most important roles as a human that you can have, because you're now putting someone else in this earth and that you can't be selfish anymore. And I think a lot of that comes from having a selfless mindset and saying like, I need to put other people first, but also not ignoring the fact that you have to take care of yourself. So I think when I think about masculinity, I think a lot about, it's not just like a monetary thing. Some of the people I look up to, like my buddy Ken Rideout, who I see all the time, where I'm like, damn, like someone at 55 still values his own personal health, but still finds ways to show up for his kids and gets to show them how to, be tough and to play sports and to, lean into also some emotional sides, whether it's playing instruments and not like discrediting all those things either. Cause I think it's super easy to be like, I need my boys to play football or play basketball and only do those things. But I think to me, what masculinity means is being well-rounded in a lot of areas, right? Whether it's a financial, whether it's an emotional, whether it's, being the leader of the house. And I think, as I've gotten older, I've started to just sharpen that. Even when I've been in relationships and like things haven't gone well, like I always reflect on myself. It's never the girl. It's always typically it's my fault. And sometimes that comes in a sense of me not being vulnerable enough, me not, sharing things, or me not like communicating. And I think over the years, I've learned that, masculinity is like, it's something that's an internal game that obviously on mainstream, there's so many different red pill fucking frameworks. And there's so many other things that people talk about where, I think guys like Williamson that have interviewed a lot of people and, other like, therapists in the game have always kind of outlined it to be different for each human. But I think for me, it's being well-rounded and not identifying it as just like one thing.
There's so many things there that I'd love to pull a thread on, but we'll run out of time. But I think the question I really want to ask is, have you ever considered that the content and media that you create could be filling the role of the coach or mentors that you experienced and fulfilled that fatherly, masculine figure in your childhood? Have you ever considered that you could be fulfilling that role for somebody else, and how incredible that is?
I mean, I've never actually I never thought of it in that context, but from the framework around what you said of like the mentors and the people that I looked up to and how I've been able to kind of sharpen my tools from being a student and learning from others, I think a lot of that does present itself in content. It was never done from an intentional standpoint, but I think to your point, the reason so many times, great players aren't always great coaches is because it comes easy to them. But players that have to work at it, that have to really learn and be a student of the game, tend to be better coaches or figures and are able to better communicate the message to others. And I think where I sit now, it's for a long time, I was a poor student, and I kind of intentionally got dialed in around a lot of things I cared about in self-development and personal finance and all these other things. And I think, it does present itself at times in content. And I think when I see people that come up to me and they say, what's up? Or when I'm at majors and they truly tell me their story around how they got inspired or what video it took to really take them over the wheelhouse. And I think a lot about how that is probably what I wanted when I was younger. And even you bringing it up now, it definitely makes me reflect on that in that sense of like, I think as kids, like sometimes when you lack something, like that's kind of the thing that you crave. And for me now, I've kind of built that muscle and it's maybe become easy for me that I can put that out online and it communicates well to not only young men, but to also, women and to also adults and kids and whoever it might be. So I think as you say that, I even reflect on it more. And I think it's been interesting to just see it's always interesting. The demographics of people that come up to me typically when I'm at these races is so diverse that it'd be hard for me to be like, oh, this is only for young men, because it's actually not.
Yeah.
And I think whatever it is, like the mindset that I've taken from Gary Vee, from David Goggins, from Jesse Itzler, from Naval Ravikant, and I've kind of formed it into my own recipe. And to your point of like, whether it's a gratitude or not taking yourself too seriously or being competitive or being gritty and resilient, like all these traits that I feel like make up who I want to be. And I guess in a masculine way of like, yeah, like what does that mean to be a man? Like, why do I care that I have no personal finance? Like, why do I care? Why do I value investing? Why do I value being able to do hard shit? Why do I value having a level of emotional intelligence to listen to someone and hear them out and make them feel like they're the fucking number one priority and I don't even know them? And I think over these years, like they were things I never got taught that I just actively seek because I was curious around it. And then it's become a part of who I am. And I think to me, all those things I even just outlaid, like that to me is like well-rounded, balanced. And when I think about masculinity, I think so much of it is around that. It's like not just like this one pigeonhole thing of just because I'm a provider, I don't think that just makes me masculine as fuck. Just because I make a shit ton of money or I could buy my wife or my future wife everything that she wants, like that's just one thing. And like if you can't show up from an emotional standpoint, if you can't be a listener, if you can't then be a leader, like I think there's so many other elements that are required when you're talking about masculinity. But I think that what you said around the content stuff, it's definitely an interesting perspective that makes me think about it even further.
It's a phenomenal opportunity is the way that I think it's framed, because I mean, it's easy to reflect on the people that go, oh, content creation's vapid and narcissistic and all this sort of stuff. And you forget all the people that say, oh, you inspired me to do X, Y, or Z, or I ran my first marathon because of this, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's something I'm always very proud of but it's always disarming because I don't take myself too seriously. There's no part of me that can conceive that just by me doing something that appeases my own curiosity and enjoyment has had an impact downstream to somebody else. But that's the opportunity of taking one step forward. And I think that within the context of everything you just said there, you doing that for yourself has a massive, massive effect on those around you, which means that just by focusing a little bit more on yourself and taking things a little bit more seriously, if they're important to you, will make the world a better place. Mm. I think we've run out of time. Where is the best place for people to find you?
Instagram, TikTok, if you want like short form content, and then handles Matt Choi _6, and then on YouTube, Matt Choi.
Excellent. Well, I'm back in April, so we can do a part 1 and talk about whatever stupid shit we've been doing since then.
I'm sure there'll be so much, bro.
I think we're trying to arrange a mile time trial next week, so
that's gonna be fun.
Maybe. Anyway, lap 3. It's all about lap 3. That's all we need.
That's a fact.
Been a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, my friend.